President Trump and China's Xi Jinping have agreed on an in-person meeting during a call this week. But while talks are a welcome sign for relations between the two nations, China's ongoing restrictions on rare earth minerals have already begun to impact industries reliant on the key materials. Joining us now with more, we've got Gracelin Baskaran, Director of the Critical Minerals Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gracelin, really excited to get some clarity with you because there's been a lot of back and forth about where these negotiations stand with regards to rare earth minerals. We know that China is allowing more limited exports of rare earths as part of these negotiations. Just talk me through where things stand with regard to those exports today.
So what happened in April was that China imposed export restrictions, which means that you now had to apply to get a license to be able to export these rare earths. What happened at the same time was China put 16 American companies, 15 of which were in aerospace and defense, on a list that they could not access these materials. After the negotiations in Switzerland, China did not agree to get rid of their export control framework, but they did agree to remove American firms off of the list, which means that they could now apply to get the permit to be able to get these materials. What we've seen, however, is that we had a very short supply of these materials here in the United States. And so we've seen that certain auto companies have already run out. We saw Ford actually just stop production of the Ford Explorer in Chicago because it hasn't been able to access these materials. There's a frustration right now that China is not issuing out all of the permits fast enough, creating these supply chain disruptions. Our understanding is that about 25% of permits have been approved. And given we are coming from a system where there was no permitting, you put in the order and you got the rare earths, this has been a shock to our industry here.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about the macro and market impact of that slow walking of these exports from Beijing as you just laid out.
So these rare earths are absolutely imperative for almost every industry. We use them in everything from our defense technologies, like our warships, fighter jets, missiles, lasers, tanks. They're in automotives, and I'm not talking just about electric vehicles, right? They're in your seatbelts, they're in the stereos of your car, they're in your steering wheel, they are in everything. They are in MRI scanners, cancer treatment. So the disruptions are being felt very quickly. Oftentimes when you have export restrictions, you may not feel them for 6 months to a year, which allows you the opportunity to create alternate supply. That's not the case here. We knew that when the restrictions came out, we probably had 60, maybe 90 days that we could last before we clean ran out. Even though we mine those heavy rare earths here in the United States, we have zero capability online right now to separate them here. So until early this year, even the heavy rare earths that we mined here, we sent to China for separation. We now hold those and are building our capabilities here.
Yeah, Gracelin, great overview. I do want to turn to my contributor for a question. James, as Gracelin was just sort of laying out the widespread impact of any slowdown in rare earth minerals being exported to the United States, does this stand out to you as sort of a really important red line in the tariff negotiations, given that impact?
It does, and I think Gracelin made some good points. I mean, 95% of the rare earth minerals come from China. We need to make an agreement, and I was interested. 8 of those rare earth minerals you need to make an iPhone. So this tells us, we didn't see it in the first quarter earnings because that's the past. I'm concerned as we get into the next few quarters that companies start seeing what Gracelin is talking about, which they cannot get elements to create production. That really creates a real problem for earnings. So this is something we're looking at very closely.
Yeah, perhaps we'll see, as we've already seen tariff mentions skyrocketing on earnings calls, you might hear rare earths coming up a little bit more frequently in the future as well. Gracelin, I want to bring you back into the conversation here. Who has the leverage in these discussions? Because as James just mentioned, the U.S. really requires China for these rare earths. So who has the kind of power play here?
China has the power play because it's got a complete monopoly on the market. When the restrictions really hit the news cycle back in April, it was within about a week and a half that the U.S. government had said they're willing to negotiate with China. And already when, the U.S. hasn't seen the pace of licenses being issued, there has been a vocal frustration. So China has a leverage here, and they're very strategically not getting rid of their export licensing framework, which gives them the ability at any time to decide what companies and which countries actually can access these permits. So there is no doubt that they are retaining their leverage very strategically. Countries like Australia, Saudi Arabia, and the US are building their capabilities in parallel. But like I always say, mining is a very, very long-term industry. It can take decades to bring a mine online, and it takes still a number of years to build a processing facility too.
So Gracelin, we're just about a month away, a little over a month away from the end of that 90-day tariff pause. In your view, what is this going to look like? What is the kind of net result going to be of these trade talks between the U.S. and China with regard to rare earths?
China has made it very clear they're not interested in the tariffs, and they need a slightly more permanent solution. So the extent to which the U.S. is willing to put a longer term guarantee, I don't think working in 90-day increments is going to work for the Chinese. And if it doesn't work for the Chinese, we're still going to see our rare earth and potentially other minerals with time be restricted. So this is certainly going to be a very, very powerful driver given the leverage they carry as China pushes for a more long-term solution with as close to zero tariffs as possible.
Gracelin, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for your insights this morning.